Welcome to a platform where we debate on the top stories of the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, and other leagues with the best in the world of sports. You'll also get interviews with many athletes and media talents at several basketball events, including the WNBA and college basketball. My name is Alford Corriette, and this is Nothing But That Sports Talk. Welcome to another episode of Nothing But That Sports Talk. I'm Alford Corriette alongside Alford from Her Hoop Stats. Welcome to the show.
Hey Rafiq, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's wild coming. I mean, I've seen you doing everything you've done with the WNBA and women's sports. So I figured why not bring you along? Just talk about like the whole journey of how it started and how you feel about it up until this point.
Sure. So I definitely have been always a fan of the W, for years. It was really like watching players like Candace Parker and Diana Taurasi that got me into the W. And then, eventually had the opportunity to start working with her hoop stats back around 2020, 2021. Kind of starting out doing graphics, just doing things on the side, but figured since the Liberty are in town, let me see if I could, take a stab at trying to cover them because obviously it's the hometown team and definitely love the New York Liberty. And, started doing that, getting my feet wet more in the media coverage, doing that more and more, and have just continued at it, seeing the journey of the Liberty from underdog to champions now in 2024. And then, have just continued branching out, looking at different things, covering more of the international stuff as well, just seeing what's going on in the WNBA, but also in women's basketball around the world.
Yeah, women's basketball is definitely evolving year after year after year ever since 2000s. And we got to thank Kathleen Engelberg for everything she's doing with the W, and getting it to as peak as it could be 28 years in. I mean, ever since you started covering the W, you had the Seattle Storm win the fourth championship. Of course, that was Sabrina Stewart and Sue Bird was there. And that was the last championship ever before she retired. Chicago Sky won their first ring. Angels won their first two, and now the New York Liberty got the job done. And we'll get more into that. And well, obviously, this first half of the decade, 2020s, and the W is amazing.
Oh, for sure. You look at just what we've been able to see. We've been able to see, well, just from an overall standpoint, new CBA that's, brought in some more amenities for the players. But also when you look at just the overall platform of the W, how much fanfare, how much interest and intrigue has the WNBA has grown to where, the WNBA is now a mainstream thing. It's not just a league that some people have thought like, okay, it's cool, but it's not my thing. Like people are actively invested and watching. And then this last year, it's just gone up to a whole new level when you think of just the influx of young stars coming in, like the Caitlin Clarks, the Angel Reeses, the Rickea Jacksons, and the Cam Brinks, who have now brought an entirely different dynamic to the game. And then when you think of players that are coming up on the horizon, the Juju Watkins, the Hannah Hidalgos, and Paige Beckers, and other stars, women's basketball continues to grow, and I love it.
Yeah, we all gotta love the W, man. I mean, you can't get any better than what you've been seeing the past few years from the up and coming stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese to now is Sabrina Ionescu.
Oh yes, Sabrina Ionescu has been, big time in this period for women's basketball. When you think of what she did at Oregon and what she did, in terms of being a pioneer with Nike, having the shoes, and also, where you're seeing her shoe line, worn almost all over the world. And, you're really seeing her be that face of just a major sports brand, especially in the women's basketball division. You also have other players, doing the things with the shoes, like Brianna Stewart, who also plays for the Liberty, who's doing her thing. But Sabrina has always been big time, and she continues to be.
Yeah, and you get to cover all this type of nuggets while working for Hoop Stats. I mean, her Hoop Stats is pretty much its own exclusive ESPN in a small way. Like you get to like do research on the player stats, the history of who had the most points, break down the players' strengths and weaknesses when they're on the court, going up and down the plays that they play under the coaches that run the plays. You get to do all that.
Yeah, definitely. Her Hoop Stats is one of the premier platforms in the women's basketball side of things for stats on the game, shot information. We've also tried to improve the website over years, like where we've now added assist trackers where you can kind of see, who's assisted to who, how many times. One of the big premier since we're talking about Liberty, a bit of prevalent connection was between, Sabrina Ionescu and Yara Sabli, a bit of a carryover from the Oregon period. So you're able to get information on that at her hoop stats. You're also able to get information on the salary cap, the CBA information for those that want to learn more about the business in the WNBA of learning, how much their favorite players are making, what are some moves that their teams can make, what are the cap space situations. But you're also getting articles and insight from other people who work with her hoop stats, also in the collegiate level, but also on the WNBA level.
Exactly. And that's the type of building block you need in order to get people interested in WNBA because I've interviewed players at B a day that we were, when I asked them like how they got started, they said that it was never on anywhere. I mean, there were times where WNBA games would get tape delayed and they wouldn't get played till later on.
Yeah, the WNBA games, it's really you're really seeing that profile shift to where, like now instead of not having, games on tape delay, you're having games live, multiple games where you can have three, four games in one night, in one sitting, multiple games a week across multiple platforms. And I think, just that overall reach continues to grow and grow.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we got some of that like in the beginning years of the late 90s and 2000s, but I'm glad we finally getting that back. I mean, you had the Liberty being televised on Fox 5 and My 9. They televised in all the games, not like literally, unlike the Yes Network where they only televise whatever they're not competing with the New York Yankees. That's good. Give the New York Liberty their own channel to televise the games.
Yeah, no, I think that was huge, especially to have the My Nine, the Fox Five, to build that local presence where you're having a channel like Fox Five, My Nine, that is basically in pretty much every household in the tri-state area. So you're also opening up for millions and millions of viewers across the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, to really see Liberty basketball. And you have people from the entire area that will tell you that they've been watching this Liberty journey and through that, you're also getting a younger generation to now get invested because they have the accessibility to watch the WNBA. Where it is before you talked about it with the Yes Network. Sometimes if you're competing with the Yankees, you may not be able to watch your Liberty game unless you had the Yes app or something like that. Whereas now My Nine, Fox Five, you turn on that game, you're getting Liberty basketball. You're getting a network that for those 2, 3 hours is going to be dedicated towards bringing you the best Liberty coverage. And then you also have to thank the people that were associated with it, people like Roz Golden Wood and Tina Savasio, amongst others, that definitely helped give the Liberty good coverage on that front.
And it's a good way to get Chris Sharon and Michael Grady, who's now
Exactly.
play-by-play for the Minnesota Timberwolves, to come back to the Barclays Center. You couldn't get him back when he to cover the Brooklyn Nets, which was like one of the beginnings of his broadcasting career. But at the very least, you get him when he's covered the New York Liberty.
Yeah,
So
yes, definitely.
Michael Grady made a big impact in basketball when he was working like a sideline reporter, now play-by-play commentator in New York. Now he's going to Minnesota, making a big impact there. So, I mean, yes, he's getting his own channel where he's the lead broadcaster, but you kind of miss him in New York. And I'm glad we're at least getting to Liberty season.
Oh, indeed. Grady's a legend in the broadcast business. He's one of the top, he's one of the best that you have. And, to continue to see him flourish, you definitely have to love it. And you definitely have to see and be thankful that he was here for this Liberty season, especially a Liberty season like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of Liberty season like this, obviously, we're just coming off the New York Liberty very first championship, 28 years in the making, after a sweated out 5 game series. Well, highlighted for Sabrina Ionescu's iconic shot 2 games after we blew a 15-point lead. And then obviously, Liberty lose game 4. But then they bounced back and won a game 5 where the shooting was not that great, but you got the job done.
Yeah, that was definitely a series for the books, especially when you think of how the first few minutes went of game one. You thought that, okay, could this possibly be gearing up for a Liberty sweep with the way they looked against Minnesota, where they were just hitting shots, firing off on all cylinders. And I think the Barclays Center crowd was receptive of that, and even more so because of how New York fared against Minnesota in the regular season, where it was tough, and Minnesota, it seemed like, had New York's number, and then it seemed like, okay, now we're clicking, now everything is firing, and then you go from that, then the lead dissipates, and then New York was able to get it back, but then that dissipates, you ultimately lose in overtime, and then it really becomes a series where they had to win the next game. Game two had a little bit of a similarity where they started out hot, and then it kind of went away, but they were able to hold that. You had the Leonie Fibich three-pointer that put them up 9, that it seemed like the Barclays Center crowd just became unglued. Then you go to Minnesota for games 3 and 4. Sabrina hits that clutch shot, especially after a game where New York was down big. And then the heroics of Breanna Stewart really keeps New York in that series, gets them to where they needed to be to set the stage for Sabrina to hit that shot over Kayla McBride. And then that puts them up 2-1. We all know what happens in game 4. It seems like, okay, can the Liberty win the championship in Minnesota? Ultimately, it's a close game. You have the foul that's called on Sabrina Ionescu on Bridget Carlton. She hits the 2 free throws. That sets up the stage for game 5. And what a game 5 it was, back and forth. Minnesota went up, then New York came back. You had it goes into overtime where you really see the German connection of Leonie Fibich and Niara Sabli shine. Leonie hits the 3. Niara Sabli had heroics all of game 5 when you think of what she was doing, driving, rebounding, just defending, and she had great defensive moments on Nafisa Kalia in overtime. Blocked Nafisa, also stole the ball from Nafisa and had the breakaway that put him up 5. So just a series where it was just up and down, but it just seems so New York that New York would win in such a dramatic fashion.
Yeah, very dramatic. And you know what? A lot of people want to turn back to the fact that would not be possible if that foul on Lance Smith got overturned. But you know what? I don't care. I told people, let the Liberty have this one. They waited 25 years to get it done.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think, a lot of people had discussions about the officiating, about fouls, but it even that became a game in itself. The battle of the press conference, where you have after game 3, Cheryl Reeve say, "Oh, it's hard to guard against Stewart because Stewart's called one way, and then it kind of seems the officiating swings to Minnesota." Then after game 4, Coach Brondell is a bit, you know, enraged about it, talking about the officiating. So you have that swing in a different direction. But hey, at the end of the day, Minnesota had a chance to win in overtime, and they did not get it done. So you can't just say that that game was decided on that one call, because who's to say if Minnesota probably handled their business in the first 2, 3 quarters, it's probably not a situation where New York can even get back. So again, there's so many intangibles. At the end of the day, the New York Liberty sealed the deal, and they show why they were the team to beat all season.
And then after that, you had the championship parade going down in New York, up on Lower Manhattan, and then you have Club Barclays having the New York Championship celebration where Fat Joe and Remy Ma performed. And you were obviously on hand for at least one of the 2 shows, or both of them, and had seeing the fans come together to celebrate this historic occasion. How does that highlight your career as a media professional covering the W?
Oh, I think it was beautiful because when you follow the New York Liberty, especially thinking of like following them in 2023, seeing them get so close to the finals, and then ultimately it was Barclays Center where the series ended on their home floor in heartbreaking fashion. To see that redemption now come to fruition, to where now New York City is able to have a ticker tape parade, their first basketball ticker tape parade in what, 40, 50 years, where you have some people that weren't even alive when New York won its last basketball championship. So now to really see an entire city come out and have a ticker tape parade, thousands upon thousands of people on Broadway celebrating, young, old, and in between. And then to have the celebration at Barclays Center where you have Fat Joe come out, you have Remy Ma come out, you have Coach Brondello dancing to some of the songs and everything. It just seemed like a culmination of what was such a crazy ride, but to be there for the entire journey, especially in the super team era, if you want to call it. I think that's what's amazing to me, to see them have that fall and have that redemption as well.
Yeah, it's all it's all because of Star Five players and the bench, and
Mhm.
that's how you put together championship culture in New York City.
Yeah, it's definitely about having a good team. You always have to have your quality players, but you also have to have the bench. And I had the opportunity to collaborate with the New York Liberty under Liberty Unlocked, talking about the bench. And when you look at, the refinements they've made to the bench, when you think of adding a Leonie Fiebich, who was on the bench for most of the season, but when you talk about what she can provide, a 6'4" wing that has length, that can defend, but also has proven to be one of the most lethal shooters that we have in the W, to come off the bench and be able to do that. To have a Kayla Thornton, who now is going to Golden State, and we will definitely miss her in Brooklyn, but to have someone 6'1" physical that can be so versatile, adding Kennedy Burke after her stint at Villeneuve d'Ascq in France, someone who's also versatile in itself. You saw the shift where New York really realized we needed to get better defensively. They handled that in the offseason and addressed that while trying to ensure that the star players had enough support to win this championship.
Yes, and hopefully it's not the last championship we get in New York City. Well, yeah, but continue the conversation with New York Liberty as they kind of lost a major piece in Kayla Thornton to the WNBA expansion draft led by the Golden State Valkyrie. She'll be teaming up with the likes of Monique Billings, Kate Martin, and a bunch of international players on the newly formed Golden State Valkyrie roster. How important will Caitlin Thornton be for the franchise is going to be brand new going to 2025?
Yeah, so when you look at Kayla Thornton on the Golden State Valkyries team, you're getting someone that knows what it takes to win a championship. Someone who was in the trenches for the Liberty the past 2 seasons, someone that has a rapport with GM Niema Ohanan, who was the assistant GM in New York under Jonathan Kobe. You're getting someone that has the toughness, that has the grit, that has all the intangibles that you need, and especially at a decent salary price that if you want to keep her on the team, you have someone that can definitely be a good role model, a very selfless person. Everyone talks about what Kayla Thornton has done for others, just being, if it's just cracking a joke in the locker room, but also being the type of person to pick players up in practice. That's the type of player you need, especially to be a quality building block, because with an expansion team, it's not just about having younger pieces to have the building blocks. You also need quality veterans that can kind of usher in some of these younger pieces to being the players that you want for them in the future.
Exactly. And I'll blame him for not picking anybody for the Seattle Storm because you got the free agency coming up, but you could pick any one major piece to join the Golden State Valkyrie. And then, of course, they have a number 5th pick in the WNBA draft next year. So you got that going on. Any one of those major pieces will help the Golden State Valkyrie start out the franchise. And speaking of starting off, do you see as this roster is put together? Do you see like rebuilding not so great team, or will they at least fight for a playoff spot? Because we thought the Indiana Fever with Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston was going to be poor, and they weren't to start the season, but they picked it up and had a playoff run. Got swept by the Connecticut Sun. So, do we see a similarity to that, or will they actually not be good?
Well, I think the beauty of this Golden State Valkyrie team is they still have a lot of more moves to make because you still have free agency to consider and they have a ton of cap space. So really, seeing is this preliminary roster how this shapes up to opening day, because there's players that you can add and there's players that you can subtract. And I think once we get the full scope of who's in Golden State on opening day, we can kind of see, okay, how does this team fare? Obviously, I think it's going to be a big adjustment period because now you have a whole bunch of players that for the most part haven't really played with each other in this setting. You have a new head coach in Natalie Nakaze, who was the former assistant in Las Vegas, she's getting her feet wet in the coaching ranks as well. So I think this whole sense of first steps is going to be something that Golden State has to really learn to and adapt to. But I'm really excited to see who they bring in and see, are they going to try to bring in some heavy hitters that and try to compete for the playoffs? Who knows? Is this going to be a team that's in the lottery, again, or well, in the lottery in the future years? Who knows? And I think that's the beauty of the expansion. It's really an uncertain time, and we're just buckling up along for the ride.
Yeah, and I will say this though, I loved how the WB expansion draft is organized this time around compared to back in the way when you had the Atlanta Dream. I mean, E40 and Baron Davis both got to announce each picks for a team that's going to be joining the Bay Area. And it may not be as hype as the Golden State Warriors after we watched it win 4 championships in 8 years from 2015 to 2022, but everything has a starting stone.
That's true. Everything has a starting stone, but it's interesting you bring up the Golden State Warriors because obviously the Valkyries are owned by Joe Lacob, who is also the Warriors owner. But he even said in the press conference that he wants to win a championship within the first 5 years. So we'll see like how aggressive this Golden State team is. But they have a lot of fans already. I think I saw a stat where it's like they had 20,000 season ticket deposits already. So they're really going to try to fill out that arena and really get that crowd rocking. And I can't wait to see how the fans adapt Golden State as the Valkyries as their team as well.
Yes, I can't wait indeed. And obviously, fans can look forward to that new team. And another new team is going to be coming in 2 years. As well, you found out that the Toronto Temple will be the new name for the franchise in the WNBA. What are your impressions about the name Temple? Does that fit with the Toronto culture?
I think a lot of people were thrown off by it because I think some were probably hoping they kept something maybe along the lines of Raptors, something dinosaur related, who knows? But I think Tempo fits. I mean, I like the alliteration Toronto Tempo. I think it's kind of a good neutral, base to really just try to say it fits with the pulse of the city. It fits with pace. It fits with the hustle and bustle of what Toronto may bring. I like the name. I mean, I know some other people feel they could have gone with something different. They've had their own explanations on the name. They've talked about it, wanting a name that was inclusive for the English and French speaking fans in Canada, because you obviously have Montreal in Canada as well. And then also the Toronto Tempo brass stated that they want to play some home games in other Canadian locations outside of Toronto. So I'm guessing that's also a name that you want to be able to market to fans in the different regions of Canada. But I like the name. What do you think about it?
Oh, it's a good name. I mean, you have to like represent. People know that you're not just represent like a dinosaur age. You represent like the six, Sun 5 plus the six, which includes the fans, because you can't have a good basketball culture if the fans are not coming around to watch the games. Like seriously.
No, that is definitely the truth. I mean, you saw what happened with the Toronto Raptors on their path for their first championship, how much the entire country of Canada really came around and rallied around the Toronto Raptors, where that arena was rocking, especially in the finals, especially to beat a Warriors team and kind of end what people thought at the time was a dynasty that was terrorizing the NBA for so many years, and to have those Torontonian fans be able to celebrate. Now having that on the W as well, that's going to be a crowd that's going to be very popular.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to get out of these new franchises coming up in the next few years. I mean, the Atlanta Dream only took like 2 years in order to get some WNBA Finals appearances, and even though they had get to win a WNBA Finals game, I know Atlanta felt good to actually be in the finals that then. Imagine what we're going to get for the you just went over the type of roster Golden State Valkyries is going to be. I mean, even before it got completed, and we don't know what type of roster the Toronto Temple is going to have, but that's not going to happen for another year because it's a building block. Oh yeah, you also got to return to Portland. They finally got a WNBA team back. Hopefully it's the Portland Fire, but who knows?
Yep. And then I think the time period of 2026 is going to be interesting because you also have, like you talked about, the Portland team that will also be playing in 2026. But the beauty of when it comes to roster creation, if you think about it, if you look at how the WNBA is structured right now, basically 70, we can argue most of the league is slated to be free agents in 2026. So are we going to possibly see some big free agent splashes to Toronto and to teams like Portland right out the gate, to where now these expansion teams are getting some of the creme de la creme of WNBA players right off the gate, and thinking just about how that may affect the parity in the league, where for the past few years it's been New York Vegas, and then Minnesota was able to come and give a challenge. But now to think about other teams now you can have in the mix. What if you have a situation where the Toronto Tempo builds a team that surprises everyone and wins a championship in the first year, or Portland does that, or another team does that? Just think of what that can mean for expansion. And now other teams want to, oh, if they could do that, we could do that too. And then just really creating that fanfare of the W where anything is truly possible.
Yeah, that could happen. I mean, it's impossible. I know we're talking women's basketball, but look at how the Vegas Golden Knights almost won a championship his first year in the league. So don't think we're not going to get that from Golden State Valkyrie or whatever roster that Toronto Tempo and Portland franchise is going to come up with. And you still got one more team that Captain Engelbert's trying to squeeze in for her mission to expand to 16 teams by 2028 is complete. Oh yeah, speaking of Captain Engelbert, she was at the Women's Champions Classic, but more of that later. Right now, it just goes to show how sports can be unpredictable.
Oh, of course, and that's the thing about sports. It's all about the highs and the lows. It's all about the ebbs and the flows, and it's really about how the game goes because sports, anything can happen. A team can be big and they could lose the game. A team can be down and they win the game. So I think that's the beauty of sports, which it's all about leaving it on the floor, and then the game isn't over until the clock hits zero.
Yeah, it's never over. And now let's transition a little bit. As you notice, I was at the Women's Champions Classic last night. The Tennessee Lady Vols, they had a slugfest against Iowa and Lucy Olsen, who put up some good numbers. But it was Tennessee that ultimately walked out with the win on a 14-11 run to win the first game. In the second game, it was pretty much your typical UConn blowout when ranked 22 in the country go up against a 22 ranked Louisville Cardinals, and they just steamroll them out the gate. Like, there was at one point where it was like 62-26. Man. And Paige Beckers, even though she didn't have that great a performance, she wasn't satisfied with that in the press conference. She was happy that the teammates might step up. Sarah Strongman put up some good numbers, and the bench came to play as well. And the crowd was closing in on the type of crowds you see at Liberty games. I mean, what is this, WNBA Finals or the Women's Final Four? I mean, if you had watched it or followed it, you would have understood because Women's Champions Classic was literally something else. You got the WNBA media sitting at the VIP setting courtside. You had Andrea Carter and Diamanda Shields. What else? And a few of the WNBA players pull up. It's just so amazing how it comes together. And then you have the original WNBA commissioner, who's not a commissioner of the Big East Conference, and Kat Engelbert, as I mentioned, come in. So if you had got a glimpse of, if you even at least knew that the Women's Champions Classic was possible, how does that fit to the example of what you were talking about as far as the growth of the W in college and the WNBA?
Yeah, so the Women's Champions Classic, was a fantastic event, and I think first part to hit on what you said, talk about the growth of the W. A lot of the fans of the W follow these players from their collegiate time to the W, and they continue watching them through on the W. So I think as you've seen the growth, especially in the collegiate ranks, which we saw, that's just a natural carryover into the W. And I think UConn is one of the top, you can argue the greatest collegiate women's program in history for the amount of championships that they've won, for the amount of all-star and legendary talent that they've brought into the women's game. And then you're also getting Iowa, a team that has a rabid fan base, a team that, their fans will travel and come. And then you think of Tennessee, that was legendary under Pat Summitt. You think of a Louisville team that's always been in the mix. So I think to really get those four teams, get them in Brooklyn, that has really shown that they are a women's basketball hotbed. I think it's fantastic, and I think it definitely, shows the growth of the game. You had some great games. You talked about the Iowa versus Tennessee game. At first, Tennessee, their press was giving Iowa some problems, and it looked like, okay, maybe this could be a Tennessee blowout. But then Iowa came back and gave them a fight, and it was really a back and forth game until, Tennessee ramped up the press again, and then they were able to kick the door wide open. Not as much competition in UConn versus Louisville because that UConn team is stacked when you talk about Sarah Strong, Paige Beckers, AZ Fudd, just so many people, Caitlin Chen, Shade, El Alfie, Ice Brady, and other players that can come in. And this is a UConn team that could possibly be a national championship contender. So you have to really be on your A game when you're facing them. And I think that, it shows that, women's basketball continues to grow. UConn continues to really be at the forefront of things, and I think we're set for what can be a very, very good conclusion in a few months to the collegiate season.
Exactly. And you know what? This is something that fans have been fighting for. And Ariama mentioned in the press conference that you would love to have this happen at Madison Square Garden, but they couldn't make it happen. But I'm glad they brought it to Brooklyn because, man, you talk about long hours of work tried to bring college basketball in the women's side to the Barclays Center, which is known to have years and years of college basketball ever since its inception in 2012, ever since the Barclays opened in 2012. It's not just a Brooklyn Nets, New York Liberty kind of court. It's open to all basketball leagues.
Oh, it is. And I think, when you think about what Gino Auriemma said about, wishing they had it at Madison Square Garden, I think this is the perfect example of tap in or tap out. Because you did have a WNBA presence at Madison Square Garden with the Liberty under the James Dolan ownership. And obviously we saw how that ended, where not putting as much investment, not putting as much stock into the women's game, shipping them off to Westchester and then kind of treating them as second rate. And then ultimately James Dolan sold. And what happens? The New York Liberty have a reinvigoration through the Joe Tsai and Clara Tsai umbrella, to where in just 5 years since taking over the reins, they are now champions of the WNBA, something the Dolan administration could not bring to New York. In just 5 years, the New York Liberty are one of the top teams and part of the cultural zeitgeist, something that was not necessarily possible, was maybe in the early years of the Dolan when you think of Teaspoon and others there, but they definitely lost their way under Dolan. And then, Dolan has had his hands in some things not unfavorable to the WNBA in terms of being the sole vote to try to block WNBA expansion teams. And I think now you're seeing that, okay, if you want to ward off Manhattan and Madison Square Garden to women's basketball, they will flock to Brooklyn and they will create some historical moments and more historical magic in the Barclays Center as the Barclays Center now continues to work on its lore and its legacy.
Exactly. The Liberty are doing what the Knicks and Brooklyn Nets could not. And I know James Dolan, after watching them finally win championship, he probably wished that they kept him at the Garden after they pulled it off right here, or even at the very least play one or two games at the Garden next season. You got to. I mean, part of me wants to go back to the Garden because that's where it all started, but you also be happy it's in Brooklyn anyway because it's closer to me. I mean, you coming all the way from Jersey, trying to travel all the way to Brooklyn, you would disgrace this.
Listen, watching the Liberty, I have no problem commuting from Jersey to Brooklyn to watch the New York Liberty because it really is special to see what they have become, to really see a community, a Brooklyn community really rally and make that team their own, to where you can go to a game could be scheduled on a Saturday afternoon at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. You'll see fans up and down Atlantic Avenue with seafoam gear on, ready for that game. You're seeing little kids that they may not aspire to be a Darren Williams or Joe Johnson or one of these Brooklyn players. They want to be a Sabrina Ionescu. They want to be a Brianna Stewart. They want to shoot the ball like Leonie Fibic. They want to block shots like John Cole Jones. And to see what the New York Liberty have done for that Brooklyn community, it's special.
Yeah, and right now, in terms of that's something that you need to have as the New York Liberty look to chase their second championship next season. And I know we won't start till May, but I have to bring this out anyway. The Liberty will start the season or have the ring ceremony against the Las Vegas Aces, the team that they defeated to get to the WNBA Finals and lost in 2023. And then, of course, Keelan Clark did injuries the next two games combined. And then the Golden State Valkyries played their first two games in New York in franchise history. And then they have an 8-game homestand. So Liberty hype is where it's at, man.
Oh, of course. And, I think even with Ring Night, what a special event. What a way to kind of begin the new season, but kind of close off that redemption chapter, to where last time in 2023, it was the Aces celebrating the championship on the Barclays home floor. It was the Aces raising up the trophy, drinking the champagne at Barclays Center. Now it's the Aces having to see New York win after they beat the Aces in the semifinals. They now have to see New York beat them and complete the redemption chapter and get their rings and kind of show that now we're on par.
Yeah, you know what? The Liberty get to the finals again. It's going to be a bit harder because the format for the first round is going to be they're going to have to play a road game no matter what in game two, and of course the finals will be a best of seven. So you got that going on. No matter who they face or who they have to get through, it's not going to be an easy road.
Oh, it's definitely it's not going to be easy road. And if you think about even this finals, I mean, think of how many players were playing hurt and banged up. You had Benigja Laney Hamilton, who, had problems with the knees this season, to where you can see it really laboring her towards the playoffs and in this finals, except for game two. You had, Alana Smith get hurt. You had other players on Minnesota with nagging injuries. You have players in New York, whether it be Leonie Fibich with the ribs and so forth. So I'm interested to see how they're able to get everyone. Hopefully, it's a little bit more spaced out. Hopefully, the games aren't too strenuous. You don't also have the probably luxury of an Olympic break where you may have a bunch of players that get a few weeks rest off in the middle of the season. You don't have that. So how does that really factor? Are you going to put in enough space into where players can get the rest, especially for players that are playing overseas and then have to play in other leagues in the off season? Like, are you going to be able to put enough spacing in between so they're not putting too much strenuous activity on their bodies?
Yes, that's something that we need to debate as we continue to watch the league grow. And now I'll do for this episode nothing but that sports star. Thank you for stopping by, Alfred. I really appreciate you coming on. Continue to do the work you do for Her Hoop Stats. And I can't wait to see you at Liberty Game in the future, fam.
All right, thank you so much, Rafiq, for having me on. It's always good to chat with you, and always good to chat about the Liberty and chat about how the game's growing.
Yeah. For Rafik, who was on Alfred, we'll see you next time.